The night nothing looked wrong. On the evening of October 14, 1988, the Caldwell house looked exactly the way it always had. A pale blue two-story home sat at the end of Brookline Court, a quiet cul-de-sac in Haddonfield, New Jersey. The lawn was trimmed, the porch light was on, and a pumpkin, already soft at the edges, rested beside the front steps. From the outside, there was no sign that anything inside was about to fracture permanently. Inside the house, Margaret Caldwell rinsed dishes at the kitchen sink while the local news murmured low from the television. Her husband, Thomas, sat at the dining table, correcting spelling quizzes with a red pen. Their routines were ordinary, almost ritualistic. Fridays were always like this. Upstairs, their daughter Emily Caldwell, 9 years old, was supposed to be asleep. Emily's bedroom was at the end of the hallway, across from the linen closet. The door was usually left open just enough for the hallway light to spill across the carpet. Margaret insisted on it. Emily said it made the shadows behave. At 9:42 p.m. Margaret called up the stairs. "Emily. Lights out." There was a pause. Then the familiar answer. "Okay, Mom." It was the last time anyone in that house heard her voice. At some point during the night, no one would ever be able to say when Emily left her bedroom. She did not take her school backpack. She did not take her shoes. She did not take her jacket, even though October nights in New Jersey were already cold. She simply walked out of her room and vanished. The Caldwells did not wake to a scream. They did not hear footsteps. There was no crash, no sound of a door opening or closing. When Margaret went upstairs at 6:18 a.m. to wake her daughter for school, the bed was empty. The blankets were folded back slightly, as if someone had gotten up intending to return. At first, Margaret smiled. "Emily," she called lightly, assuming she'd gone to the bathroom or crept downstairs to watch cartoons. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the living room. Empty. Then the kitchen. The back door was locked. The front door was locked. Every window was closed. Thomas joined her, still half asleep, irritated more than concerned. "She probably climbed into bed with you and went back," he said. But Margaret already knew something was wrong. Emily hated being cold. She hated walking barefoot on hardwood floors. She hated leaving lights on. And yet her bedroom light was still glowing. The house began to feel unfamiliar. Police arrived within 40 minutes. Officer Daniel Ruiz, one of the first on scene, would later describe the Caldwell home as too normal. Nothing was disturbed. No drawers pulled open. No signs of forced entry. Emily's pajamas were neatly folded at the foot of the bed, as if she had changed intentionally. She walked out like she was going somewhere she'd been before, Ruiz said. By noon, the street was filled with patrol cars and neighbors whispering on their porches. By evening, Emily's face was on television. A school photo. Brown hair pulled back with a ribbon. A smile missing one baby tooth. The word missing settled over the house like a permanent fog. Search teams combed the nearby woods. Divers searched the creek half a mile away. Dogs traced a scent from Emily's bedroom down the hallway, and stopped at the front door. And then, nothing. No ransom call. No witnesses. No sightings. Days turned into weeks. The pumpkin on the porch collapsed in on itself. Margaret stopped sleeping in her own bed. Thomas stopped grading papers. Emily's room stayed exactly the same. because everyone believed, at least at first, that she would be coming back. They didn't know yet that the house would learn how to hold absence. Or that one small, overlooked detail would sit quietly in that room for decades, waiting. The hours that didn't add up. By the third day, the Caldwell house no longer belonged to the family who lived there. It belonged to investigators. Yellow tape stretched across the porch. The living room filled with the low murmur of radios and the rustle of paperwork. Men in plain clothes moved through the room slowly, deliberately, as if the walls themselves might speak if treated gently enough. Detective Harold Bennett arrived just after sunrise on Monday. Mid-40s, graying at the temples, a reputation for patience. He had worked missing person cases before. He knew the rhythm of them. The way panic surged first, and then settled into something quieter and more dangerous. He started where these cases always start. The last normal day. Margaret walked him through Friday again. Every detail. What Emily ate for dinner. What she watched on television. What pajamas she wore. She described it all with painful precision, as if accuracy might reverse time. Emily didn't like scary things, Margaret said, hands clasped tightly in her lap. No horror movies. No ghost stories. She couldn't even sleep if the radio was on the wrong station. Bennett nodded, writing nothing yet. Thomas described the locks. The alarm system, old, simple, but functional. No alerts had been triggered overnight. So no one broke in, Bennett said. Thomas shook his head. And Emily wouldn't open the door for a stranger. She was shy. That was the first problem. Because children who don't open doors, don't usually disappear into the night barefoot. Upstairs, Bennett stood in Emily's bedroom longer than anyone else. The room was small, neat, carefully arranged in the way children organize the few things they truly love. Stuffed animals lined the headboard. A desk by the window held colored pencils and half-finished drawings. The curtains were drawn, but not fully. A sliver of streetlight still slipped through. Bennett noticed something the uniforms hadn't flagged. The window screen had been removed. Not torn. Not damaged. Lifted cleanly and placed behind the dresser. Who opens this window? He asked. Margaret hesitated. Sometimes Emily did. When it got stuffy. But it was cold that night, Bennett said. Yes, Margaret replied quietly. She hated the cold. Bennett crouched near the window. The drop to the ground was more than 12 feet. No scuff marks on the siding. No disturbed soil below. If Emily had left through the window, she would have had to climb, or be lifted. Downstairs, the timeline grew stranger. A neighbor across the street, Mrs. Eleanor Pike, mentioned something almost as an afterthought. I heard a car, she said. Late. Maybe after midnight. What kind of car? Bennett asked. She frowned. I don't know. Not loud. Just slow. Like someone driving carefully. Another neighbor reported their dog barking briefly around the same time. Then silence. No one saw a child. No one heard a scream. At the station, Bennett spread photographs across the table. Emily's room. The hallway. The front door. He circled back to a detail most people overlook. Emily's pajamas. They were folded. Not thrown aside. Not tangled in the sheets. Folded neatly. Like she had changed on purpose. Which meant Emily believed she was going somewhere safe. Someone she trusted. On the fourth night, Margaret sat alone in Emily's room, clutching one of the stuffed animals to her chest. She stared at the door, half expecting it to open. It never did. Instead, the phone rang downstairs. No voice on the line. Just breathing. Slow. Deliberate. By the time police traced the call, the line was dead. Bennett stood in the doorway of Emily's room later that night, the light off, the hallway casting long shadows across the carpet. He had a thought he didn't say out loud. Most children who vanish leave something behind. A shoe. A footprint. A mistake. Emily had left nothing. Which meant someone else had been very careful. And somewhere in that house, whether anyone realized it yet or not, was the reason why. The people you know best. By the end of the first week, the town of Riverside Grove had exhausted its sympathy and begun to turn inward. Flyers with Emily Caldwell's face, brown hair, missing front tooth, a cautious half-smile, covered every telephone pole and storefront window. Volunteers searched wooded trails, drainage ditches, abandoned sheds. Search dogs traced her scent to the edge of the street, and then lost it completely. As if Emily had simply stopped existing. That's when Detective Bennett shifted focus. Because when a child vanishes without noise, without struggle, without evidence of force, the investigation always narrows to one uncomfortable truth. The danger is rarely a stranger. It's someone close enough not to raise alarm. Bennett began with the obvious. The parents. Thomas Caldwell submitted willingly to questioning. He answered calmly, methodically. He had been at work until 6:30 p.m. Friday, home by 7. 2 co-workers confirmed it. Phone records backed him up. No history of violence. No financial strain. No secret life hiding beneath the surface. Margaret was harder. Not because she was suspicious, but because she was unraveling. She replayed the night endlessly. Checked locks that were still locked. Counted steps between rooms. She blamed herself for everything. For not checking again. For not sleeping lighter. For not hearing something she couldn't possibly have heard. Bennett watched her closely. Grief can mimic guilt. And guilt can mimic grief. But neither one proved anything. So he moved outward. Extended family. Neighbors. Friends. Then he found Daniel Mercer. Daniel lived 3 houses down. 32 years old. Single. Quiet. Worked nights as a delivery driver. Known for fixing bikes for neighborhood kids. Always polite. Always helpful. Emily liked him. She used to wave at him, Margaret said. He gave her a bell for her bike once. That alone wasn't enough. Until Bennett learned something else. Daniel Mercer had once been investigated, years earlier, for inappropriate behavior involving a minor. No charges. No conviction. But the report existed. Bennett knocked on Daniel's door just after midnight, catching him between shifts. Daniel didn't seem surprised. I figured you'd come eventually, he said. Inside, the apartment was sparse. Clean. Almost too clean. No children's items. No photos. No souvenirs of a life beyond routine. Daniel denied everything. I didn't take her. I wouldn't hurt her. I liked that kid. Where were you Friday night? Bennett asked. At work. That checked out. Mostly. There was a 2-hour window where Daniel's route wasn't tracked. A gap. A glitch in the system. Not proof. But not nothing. Meanwhile, rumors spread faster than facts. Parents stopped letting their kids walk alone. Strangers were watched too closely. Old grudges resurfaced. Innocent people were accused in whispers. And then something else happened. A teacher at Emily's school came forward. She mentioned a man Emily had drawn pictures of repeatedly. A tall figure. Always standing near a door. Always faceless. The teacher had assumed it was imaginary. Bennett didn't. The drawings were taken in. Studied. Compared. None of the figures resembled Daniel. Or Thomas. Or anyone obvious. On day 10, a break came, not from evidence, but from emotion. Margaret collapsed during a press conference. As paramedics helped her away, she whispered something Bennett caught only fragments of. She thought she was helping. Helping who? Helping with what? That night, Bennett returned to the Caldwell house alone. He walked the hallway again. Counted the steps. Noted the way sound carried, or didn't. He stood outside Emily's door and listened to the silence. Then he noticed something that had been there all along. A faint mark on the wall near the door frame. At child height. Like something had been dragged. Or held onto. Bennett stared at it for a long time. And for the first time since the case began, he allowed himself to think the thought every investigator dreads. What if Emily never left the house at all? The house that kept secrets. Detective Bennett returned to the Caldwell house before sunrise. The neighborhood was quiet in that way that only exists after something terrible, when people are awake but pretending not to be. Curtains twitched as he parked. Someone was always watching now. Inside, the house felt smaller than it had before. Tighter. Bennett asked Thomas and Margaret for permission to conduct a second, deeper search. They agreed immediately. Too immediately. Desperation has a way of sounding like cooperation. This time, Bennett wasn't looking for signs of escape. He was looking for signs of interruption. He examined door hinges for fresh scratches. Checked the carpet seams for fibers that didn't belong. Pressed gently against walls, listening for hollow spaces. Nothing. Until he reached the basement. The Caldwell basement wasn't finished. Concrete floor. Exposed beams. A washer, a dryer, storage boxes stacked with old clothes and forgotten holiday decorations. It smelled faintly of damp cardboard and detergent. Bennett noticed the floor drain almost immediately. It was clean. Too clean. Basements rarely are. He crouched and examined it closely. No debris. No dust build-up. As if someone had recently flushed it with water. He straightened and looked around. Nearby sat a small plastic bin, empty now, but labeled in marker, art supplies. Margaret had mentioned Emily liked to draw. Bennett asked her about it upstairs. I cleaned it out, she said quickly. After she. I couldn't stand looking at it. When? Bennett asked. The next morning. That wasn't illegal. But it wasn't normal either. Grief usually freezes people. It doesn't make them organize. Forensic teams were called in again. They found trace fibers near the drain. Red cotton. Consistent with the pajamas Emily had been wearing the night she disappeared. Not proof of death. But proof of presence. Bennett sat with that. Meanwhile, pressure mounted outside the house. Daniel Mercer's name leaked to the press. Protesters gathered near his apartment. Someone spray-painted monster across his door. He stopped leaving his home. Then came the call. Daniel Mercer was found dead in his bathroom. An apparent suicide. No note. The town exhaled. Too easily. Because suicides don't solve cases. They complicate them. Bennett reviewed Daniel's phone records. His search history. His messages. Nothing pointed to Emily. But one message, sent days before Emily vanished, stood out. A draft. Never sent. I think she knows. Bennett didn't know who she was. But the timing mattered. Back at the Caldwell house, the dynamic between Thomas and Margaret had changed. They barely spoke. Margaret slept in Emily's room now. Thomas slept on the couch. When Bennett interviewed Thomas again, he noticed something new. Resentment. Not toward the police. Toward his wife, the shape of guilt. By the 5th year, the case had become a ghost story people told themselves to sleep. Emily Caldwell's name stopped appearing on flyers. The reward money quietly expired. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of why the upstairs bedroom in that house was always kept dark. But Detective Bennett never let it go. Cases like this didn't end. They either rotted or waited. Margaret Caldwell aged quickly. Her hair grayed unevenly. Her posture curled inward, as if she were permanently bracing for impact. She stopped attending community events. Stopped answering calls from friends. She spoke only to Thomas, and even that was rare. Thomas, on the other hand, changed differently. He became meticulous. Every bill paid on time. Every lawn trimmed to regulation height. Every family photo rehung with perfect alignment. Control, Bennett thought, often appears where chaos once lived. Then, nearly 12 years after Emily vanished, Bennett received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of a handwritten note. If something ever happens to Emily, look where the house remembers. No signature. No explanation. But Bennett understood immediately. People hide things where they believe time will forget. He returned to the house again, older now, slower, but sharper in ways youth never allows. Margaret answered the door. She looked surprised to see him. Not scared. Relieved. That worried him. He asked about renovations. About repairs. About anything that had changed in the house over the years. Margaret paused. We replaced the basement flooring, she said softly. A few years after everything. Why? Bennett asked. She swallowed. It cracked. Concrete cracks all the time. But Bennett followed her downstairs anyway. The new flooring was seamless. Professionally done. Too expensive for a couple who had once struggled to afford private investigators. Bennett requested permits. There were none. That was enough. A court order followed. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in quietly, early one morning, before the neighborhood woke. The machine hummed across the basement floor. Once. Twice. Then the technician stopped. There, he said. A disturbance beneath the concrete. Not large. But deliberate. Margaret sat upstairs during the scan. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. When officers returned with warrants to excavate, she simply nodded. Thomas didn't. He shouted. He accused. He demanded lawyers. That contrast spoke volumes. The concrete was cut open. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic and time, were small personal items. A red cotton pajama top. A child's bracelet. And a sketchbook. Emily's. Inside the sketchbook was a final drawing. A woman. Faceless. Standing in a doorway. One hand raised. Not waving. Stopping. Margaret Caldwell confessed that afternoon. Not to murder. To fear. She said Emily had told her something days before she vanished. Something about a secret. About someone helping her. Margaret panicked. She confronted Emily. Voices were raised. Emily tried to leave the basement. Margaret grabbed her arm. She fell. Hit her head. Margaret said she screamed for Thomas. That he helped her fix it. Bennett had heard that word before. Fix. They hadn't planned to kill their daughter. But they had chosen to hide the truth. And in doing so, they buried her twice. Once in the basement. And once in silence. The quiet after. The Caldwell house was sold within 3 months. No sign out front. No open house. Just a quiet transfer of ownership, like a wound hastily bandaged. Margaret Caldwell pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice. Thomas accepted a plea deal for his role in concealing evidence. No trial. No dramatic courtroom confessions. Just paperwork, sentencing dates, and a line item in a county ledger. Emily Caldwell's remains were never fully recovered. What little was found was returned to the family in a white box that felt far too light to carry a child's entire life. The funeral was private. No press. No speeches. Just a small graveside service on a grey morning, the kind of weather that feels intentional, like the world knows when to lower its voice. Detective Bennett attended from a distance. He didn't approach the family. Didn't offer condolences. There was nothing left to say. The town moved on. New children walked to school along the same sidewalks Emily once had. New parents installed door alarms, baby monitors, security cameras, technologies born from old fears. Emily's case became a cautionary tale. Not about strangers. Not about monsters hiding in shadows. But about something far more uncomfortable. That the most dangerous misunderstandings often happen inside homes. That fear, when left to grow unchecked, can twist love into something unrecognizable. That silence can be as lethal as violence. Years later, Bennett retired. On his last day, he cleared out his desk. Old case files. Notes. Photographs yellowed with time. He kept one thing. Copy of Emily's final drawing. He framed it. Not as evidence. As a reminder. That children see more than adults realize. That secrets leave shapes. That houses remember. And somewhere, in a quiet suburban street that looks like every other street in America, there is a 2-story house with a basement that no one talks about. A house that once held a family. And now holds a story. One that doesn't scream. One that doesn't chase. One that waits.